everyone, and welcome to the Babylon Chronicles, a podcast dedicated to taking a look at the inner workings, the discussions, and the shenanigans involved with making one of the world's most powerful, beautiful, simple, and open web rendering platforms, Babylon.js. My name is Jason Carter, also known as Pirate JC, and I am joined by my co-host, the creator, the founder, and the mastermind behind Babylon.js,
Whoa, that's too much.
Mr. David Katui, also known as
Delta Kosh.
Delta Kosh.
Yes.
Here he is in the flesh, Mr. Delta Kosh. David, this has been a long time coming. We've been talking about doing a podcast for a while.
Since what, like 3 years easily?
Yeah,
right?
it has.
Yeah.
It's been on the tip of our brains for a while, and I'm so excited that we're finally getting this off the ground. Really to kind of give people an inner look at what it takes to make a successful open source project and a web rendering platform. Man, one thing that is certainly I've been taught in my career is computer graphics is not easy. Wow.
No, it's not.
No, it is definitely not. And our mission, our goal, of course, is to try to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah,
Math is hard. Computer graphics is a complex space. Yeah, maybe actually a good place to start would be, what is Babylon.js? Let's assume that people don't know about it.
Yeah, that's right.
Let's give a high-level overview. Do you want to start?
Okay, let's go. Babylon.js can be defined in a very different ways, right? But the one I like the most, it's probably a API, a framework that you can use in JavaScript or TypeScript that give you access to the GPU. That's very raw, right? Very low level, but that's mostly our DNA, right? We wanted to give people access to the GPU, but as you said, it's complicated, right? GPU is a new language. It's a new paradigm. The way you develop with a GPU is completely different because it's mostly massively parallel, right? Compared to a CPU. And so, yeah, the goal of Babylon is definitely to give you access to the GPU. On top of that, actually, we built a lot, right? Like we gave you a full-fledged game engine. Yeah. But that I don't want to be restrictive here. Like Babylon.js is not just for game. It's obviously for games.
Yeah.
But it can actually, our everyday basics, the way we work in the team, we don't do games, right? Like literally 0% of our time. Games are mostly done by the community. We are using Babylon.js in our professional world to give access to the GPU to applications.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think that's really, really well said. To kind of add to that, I think what I would say is, any web developer can go use the GPU.
Yes.
Without a tool like Babylon.js, it requires you to learn a complex interface layer called WebGL or WebGPU.
WebGPU now.
Yeah. And so, which is a complicated new language and interface to learn that the browsers all agree upon is the method in which web developers can talk to the GPU through the web browser. What Babylon does is it sits on top of those languages of WebGL and WebGPU as a means of making it easier for a web developer to be able to do things.
You're right. It's the abstractions. Like literally, since I am developing on computer, I started on a very, very old computer, the Amstrad. And at that time, I was only doing assembly code, like literally trying to have some very, very low level code. It's like 0 and 1, right? And then we did the first abstraction with assembly. And then on top of assembly, we learned C. And then on top of C, C++. And then for a while, I did C#. It's always an abstraction. At the very end, it's always the same things. But we try to simplify the complexities to get people access to the raw power of the system.
Yeah, so the greatest analogy, the thing that I like to kind of give as an example is how many lines of code would it take to make a cube using WebGL? Rough guess. How many would you say it would take?
With WebGL, I would say probably close to 100 lines.
Okay. And with Babylon.js, it takes one line of code.
Yeah, right. So for quite a while, we were like, our motto was one feature, one line, right?
Yeah, yes, exactly. I love that. So that's Babylon.js in a nutshell. And I do love what you said about the fact that it started with this very pure, very innocent, very simple idea of it's got to be easier for people to use the GPU than some of these more complicated layers. And I think at the core, it still functions as that today. But over the course of 10 years, do you realize that?
We went. Yeah, it's already done. It's already
this month. We just passed the 10-year anniversary of Babylon.js. Man, that's exciting. We just passed it. That over those 10 years, it has built into something really powerful. I mean, you're talking about a fully featured engine, right?
Yes.
Physics, animation, particles,
Particles.
GUI
Yeah.
layer, XR, AR, VR capabilities. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on and on about what you can do with this simple GPU interface. It's grown quite a bit, hasn't it?
And the interesting part is it was started as a pure JavaScript run. We then migrated to TypeScript for us to be able to control more the framework, but ultimately it remains a JavaScript framework. But then 4 years ago, we started the Babylon native initiative, bringing the same philosophy, the same approach everywhere else, like not just on the web. Like if you look today, you can run your Babylon code, right? And I very specifically not said Babylon.js. You can run your Babylon code on web, macOS, Windows, HoloLens, iOS, Android, Linux, and the Vision Pro whatsoever from Apple. Like we literally, it can work the same code, right? It's almost a messiah approach, right? Like one to drive everything else. That was something that was promised to the developers since quite a while. But in this case, your JavaScript code can run everywhere else. That's crazy.
Yeah. We're going to have to dedicate an entire episode to that initiative. But yeah, it's kind of amazing how it's grown from even beyond the web at this point, which is really exciting. That's a little glimpse of the technology itself. Let's talk a little bit about the evolution of the people. Like, what is the team? Who is Babylon.js? I mean, you started this team. I'd love to hear how your perspective of how it's kind of grown.
How far do you want to go back in the past?
Well, we'll get to the origin story of this hero in a minute, but let's actually talk about the people that make it for a second. So we're a team of roughly 13 people. That goes up and down every once in a while, but roughly 13 people, all full-time Microsoft employees, and we all focus on different things. But there's some key parts of our DNA that I think are really, really interesting that people might be interested in hearing about. And I have a few thoughts, but I know you do as well. I'd love to hear what makes the Babylon team special.
Oh yeah, I guess the Babylon team special, mostly inside a big company like Microsoft, right? Is like, first, we are in the open. Like literally, we operate entirely on GitHub with a forum. Like every decision is made on a public chat, right? Literally, the old Roman or Greek way, right? You go to the forum, the place, right? You talk to others and say, hey, you want to discuss about that? Okay, should we work on that? We have countless examples of, okay, do we want to do something in the framework? Okay, you know what? Let's ask the community. So we are community driven, right? The second thing that I would love to talk, but that will require a full episode. It's our goal at being respectful to our users, or put differently, being backward compatible.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's also it's an important one. But I guess the core of what we are is we really believe in the community of the project. Like it's not a Microsoft product, it's not a David Katui product, it's the Babylon community product.
I love that. Really, really well said. We're going to have throughout the course of this show an opportunity to kind of meet with the entire Babylon team and guests, and this will hopefully be a showcase where you can meet lots of different people virtually. But one thing that I definitely want to comment on is there is something very, very special about the DNA of the team. There's a couple of things that the team shares that really makes it truly, truly special, and perhaps even a little bit unique. The first one is there is a deep, deep passion for every single person on this team for exactly what our mission is. And that mission is to create one of the most powerful, beautiful, simple, and open web rendering platforms in the world. Every person on our team, it's not just an employee relationship. Every person on our team, they would do this if they could do anything else in the world. This is what they would choose to do. It is what they are absolutely super passionate about doing. The next component of this is that there is a deep, deep degree of humility. Okay. There's this idea that that's common in software engineering where you have to be the person who knows something. On our team, in a space that's as complex as computer graphics, in the Babylon.js team, it's really evident that there's a heck of a lot that each one of us doesn't know. Each one of us has pieces of the puzzle, but the whole puzzle cannot possibly be had by one person. And so that puts you into this posture of humility where everybody on the team has this deep trust that everybody else has an expertise and a passion, and we bring that collectively together and leverage each other's strengths to truly work as a team. And that is something that I think is truly, as you meet people throughout the course of the show and different episodes, you'll get a sense of just how passionate they are and how much we lean on each other for different skills, right?
Yes, that's so true, right? Even though I wrote the initial version of Babylon.js, I can, with no problem, say today that I am no more the expert of the entire engine by any means. Like, for instance, the web GPU, I will just pinpoint on this one, but I have countless examples. But web GPU was written by Alexi in our team, and he is the expert of web GPU and probably worldwide known for that because he is in connection with the Google team, with the Edge team. He is the guy who master web GPU, right? And so I have no problem to say, like, in the team, he is our expert, right? We can lean on him to be that expert, and that's fine. Like, we can't humanly, it's not possible to harness all the knowledge required to check all the GPU aspect, right? That's impossible.
Yeah. No, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah, I think you'll definitely get a sense. The other thing that I think is really, really important to mention here is that our team loves to laugh. Man, we have a good a good amount of shenanigans in making the Babylon.js engine.
Well, we live once, right? So if
that's right.
We have to enjoy the life anyway.
That's absolutely one. You know, one other interesting thing real quick that I'll just add a little anecdote is let's talk briefly about the geolocation of the team and how the pandemic affected us. Yes. That was an interesting story. So Babylon.js is the team is actually located all over the world. So we've got somebody in Germany, we've got 3 people in France, we've got people in Brazil, we've got people in the East Coast US and West Coast US. When the pandemic hit, we did, Zoom calls, team calls. That was just kind of how we worked. So when the pandemic hit, we packed up our computers and took them home, and we're running right the next day. When I think a lot of the rest of the world, certainly a lot of places at Microsoft, it took a minute to kind of figure out what remote looked like. But for us, it was kind of like, it's kind of what we've always done, which is pretty funny. Pretty funny.
And we are still doing it, right? Like, it's among the team I'm working with right now, Babylon.js is fully remote, right? We have literally no one in the office. So
Yep. That's funny. Very, very funny. Let's back up a minute. I do want to take a few minutes, and I would love to hear. I mean, obviously, Babylon.js, I'm biased, but it's one of the heroes in my story. Let's go back to the origin story, right? Every hero has an origin story. So you and I have talked about this in the past, but I would love to just go back to the roots of little itty bitty David Katui and how he had a passion for 3D and how did we get to where we are today with this really powerful and well-known engine?
So the question is, where do you want to put the cursor, right? Do you want to get to the very early stages, or where should I start?
I think maybe a good starting place might be as you were creating your first professional engine. Is that Nova? Is that right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So before that, I was doing a demo party. Maybe that's not something very well known from American people, but in Europe, like in the 80s, we had a lot of coding parties. A coding party was literally a place where you can go. There is a theme, like you have to create a demo of what you know and how to do that in real time with your computer, like Commodore 64, Amiga, or Atari ST, and then literally later a bit of PC, and demonstrating your skills, right? Literally, it was a showcase of your development skills.
That's awesome.
So I was creating 3D engine for that as well. But initially, in 1999, I founded a company in France, and the name was Vertis.
Okay.
Like Vertex, the plural of Vertex, right? Vertis.
Vertices, as I might say.
Yeah, but there is no S at the end, right?
Vertices.
I guess Vertex. And the plural is Vertis. But maybe I'm wrong.
I don't trust my grammar, that's for sure. When Gary joins our podcast, we'll ask Gary. Yeah, he'll know. Yeah.
But don't trust my English for sure. Like,
I wish you could say you could trust mine. I'm not sure I would suggest that.
But anyway, Vertis without the S at the end was the name of the company. We created that with Michel Rousseau, my friend. He is a senior artist now at Airbus. And he was creating 3D scene with 3ds Max. And initially, I created the 3D engine to render that in real time. We work with Airbus, with archaeological company, with enterprise and industries who wanted to have real time. And remember, it was the very early 2000, right? Like literally the computer, the graphic cards, that's the very beginning of GeForce, right?
Just to put this into some context, you're talking like 6 years after Jurassic Park came out, and Jurassic Park required like specialized hardware. Right. So like this is early days of computer graphics, right? When it was just starting to come home.
The acceleration was almost not there, right? It was DirectX 7, right? Mostly CPU rendering. 3D was barely there. 3D FX from Voodoo Graphics was just about to go outside, right? So we had an engine at the beginning, which is literally for me the grandfather of Babylon.js or the grandmother of Babylon.js. Because we had particles, I wrote the collision system, which is now today in Babylon, like the one where you can walk around and everything. So it was a very interesting part, and we were kind of successful, right? I kept that company until I joined Microsoft in 2011, right? So it's almost 12 years of that. At the end, we were around 40, 50 people, not just for the 3D part, but like the company itself was 50 people. And yeah, we had our success. And there is maybe an anecdote I can mention.
My favorite part of the story.
Yeah, it's a redemption arc, because at that time we were very much pioneers, right? Literally the first one, like trailblazing the entire using 3D. We were facing people like Dassault System, like they were our competitor. We went
Dassault being the behind SolidWorks.
SolidWorks, Katia, right?
Yeah.
So and they were extremely expensive, requiring to use, silicon graphics and stuff like that. And we had a solution that worked on a computer, a PC on Windows. And so we worked with schools, like we had our success. And with success came ego, right?
A little bit of arrogance.
Oh yeah, like a lot. When you believe you can walk on water and like everyone else are like just dumb.
Yeah.
We were working on the version at that time was on DirectX 9. I was working on the DirectX 10 version of the engine. Everything like was cool and everything. And we went to conferences. And at one conferences in France, we met a company, like there were two random guys on a booth with a crappy design UI that was working on macOS. Like macOS, seriously, buddy. It's like what, 1% of the market share. The name was Unity.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like literally pooping all around the place. Like, wow, you guys, you suck. What are you doing? What the fuck are you doing on macOS? And yes, arrogance 101, right? They made a shit ton of money when iPhone was out, right?
Yep.
And they were able to leverage capital.
Unity's done okay for themselves. I think we can say that. Yeah, I think they've done all right. Yeah, they've done all right.
And no one remembers Vertis, right? So it's my personal failure. I mean, no one else forced me to do that. I was absolutely convinced that closed source on Windows using only DirectX, somehow taking the aspiration from Microsoft success on Windows was the key. Like being multiple platform, who wants that, right? Like being open source, right? All that kind of stuff was me at that time. And then obviously the reality slapped me in the face correctly. Right, I sold the company. It was bought by someone, but it was not a success. I can't say that. So I joined Microsoft as a Internet Explorer evangelist. That was my redemption, right? When you walk with, when you crawl, actually.
Your humility moment was going and working on
okay,
Internet Explorer.
What? Start again, buddy. You have absolutely failed it, right? And you could have succeeded because you were there first. You have everything you could have been successful. Anyway, and then I joined Microsoft. And when I was in Microsoft, I was working on IE10. IE11 was about to go outside with the first support of WebGL. And I was working on my personal engine because I loved that. So I sold Nova. My first engine was named Nova in the Vertis company. But I created a new one named Babylon because I was a big fan of Babylon 5, the TV show. But awesome. Babylon was written in C# with Silverlight because I wanted to be multi-platform. And Silverlight was the mean for me to work on Windows.
You learned your lesson. You learned your lesson. Right? I'm going cross-platform, so Silverlight is what you chose.
And it was open sourced because it was on the Microsoft Codeplex. It's what existed before GitHub.
Yep.
But then Silverlight 5 was out with 3D support, but the 3D support was not on Mac, right? So my multi-support dream was broken already. And then IE11 came with WebGL, and I was like, okay, you know what? JavaScript is the future. It works really everywhere. WebGL now, thanks to IE11 is everywhere. So let me rewrite everything in the first JavaScript. And that's how we started, literally. I was with David Rousset. He was my colleague at Microsoft. He was also an evangelist, and he helped me evangelizing the engine, presenting it at conferences, talking about it. So it was cool. And the platform worked, like, see, right? People were interested into an open source, open-minded, not opinionated framework that literally worked everywhere. So
because
we
had
our
time,
success.
The only option they had if they wanted to do any graphics work was to learn WebGL itself, right? That was the only time they could do it.
Or they could use 3JS, which is still the biggest 3D engine out there, but the mindset behind 3JS is different, right? What I wanted was to have something on a central repo, like a very mono repo approach, whereas 3JS is a satellite of services around a core product. And I wanted to guarantee backward compatibility. I wanted to make sure that V2, sorry, does not break V1, right? I wanted to make sure that engineers betting on the product will not have to rewrite anything if a new version of the engine comes.
Love that.
Yeah, and that's how it was started. And to be fair, I wanted to write my own engine, right? So,
and you were doing this as a side project. You're just like,
it was a side project, yes. At Microsoft, we had the opportunity to sign a moonlighting contract that allows Microsoft employee to have their own side gigs if they want to, as long as it's not against Microsoft interest. So I signed a contract, moonlighting contract with Microsoft, meaning that I was able, they allowed me to, if I wanted to make money with Babylonjs, but my goal was not to make money with Babylonjs. My goal was to share my passion about 3D. And I had skills about creating shaders because I was doing that since almost 15 years, right? And I wanted to have that open source, like the slap in the face of my confrontation, right? And I'm using air quotes right now because there was no confrontation. Unity just roll over us, right? Literally. There was no confrontation, but I learned my lesson from that time, like be open source, be open-minded, like don't be arrogant. That was what I wanted for Babylon.
I do. There's a wonderful redemption arc there. You're right.
That's right.
Great. But it doesn't stop just right there, because while you're doing this as a side project as an evangelist on Internet Explorer, the next step was kind of an unexpected and remarkable one, right? Which is that
I call that my American dream.
The American dream. I love this part. Yeah. So you moved to the US and
but not for Babylon. I moved to the US to become an edge evangelist. So my redemption was done. I paid my tribute to the society. I was trying to force users to use AI for a long time, and of course it was terrible, right?
Yeah. So you move from France to the US, you work for, you do your, pay your penance, as they say in the Internet Explorer land. And then a division of Microsoft had spun up that was dedicated to looking at 3D objects and making 3D objects more accessible to people, so they weren't as hard to create and you could use them and they could be as ubiquitous as photos and videos are. And they realized that a key part of that is going to be the necessity to share 3D objects, kind of how like we can text a picture back and forth. How do you share a 3D object? And so they turned to this really interesting web platform they found called Babylon.js, which is open source. And lo and behold, guess what? Guess who created it? Someone right here within the company. And so what happened?
So if I want to step back just a little bit, I met with Sebastian Vanderberg, Seb, our own Seb from Sebavan from the forum. He was working for a company, for Microsoft in UK, on the 3D engine that will be used for Paint 3D and 3D Viewer.
So these are some. These are some applications that were a part of that whole 3D initiative.
All this initiative about 3D was about Paint 3D, 3D Viewer, Print 3D. Or 3D printer, Print 3D, right? That's the name. And Remix 3D, which was the website where they wanted to have a catalog of 3D objects. And Seb was an engineer on the UK, on the British team working on that, right? Seb is from France, but he was in London at that time. And I met with him because he was one of the people recommending to use Babylon.js. So he pinged me, and because was French, it was just easier. And he pinged me. I was just a Edge evangelist at that time. And he said, hey, we are working on that. Can you help us? So we discussed. We had a very interesting discussion. Seb was the person who added the physically based rendering in Babylon.js. Before Seb, we had the regular Fong-based rendering, right?
Yep.
That I wrote. And Seb bring the one that I wanted, which was PBR.
Yeah.
So the two of us connected, and then I was introduced with the architect lead of this team, and he wanted to hire me. Literally, he told me, you know what? I'm going to pay you for something you were doing for free. I was like, sure, of course, why not, right?
Wait a minute. So you're working full time for Internet Explorer. You're making this other thing to kind of get your mind back into the 3D space. And then someone from Microsoft says, we want you to develop this full time.
Right. Join us, right? And so I joined Seb. We were the two engineers working on that. And that's funny because of all the intricacy of Microsoft, I was not even an engineer at that time per my title. I was a program manager, right? So I was the only program manager who spent 100% of his time writing code. But anyway, so Seb and we were working with Gary and Sorab. So Gary is the lead in our team right now of Babylon Native. And at that time, he was driving the GLTF initiative. Because as you mentioned, this team wanted to be able to exchange 3D file the same way we are exchanging images. So we needed a JPEG for 3D. And Gary was spearheading the GLTF initiative for Microsoft, right? So literally, it was the four of us, Gary, Sorab, Seb, and myself, starting this tiny unity, which was mostly about GLTF, to be fair, and Babylonjs to render the website.
Yeah,
that's it.
And that effectively is basically the origins of our team. Is that the three of you sort of came together, and it slowly blossomed over the years to have over 10 million npm downloads. We're well past that at this point. 10 years, we are
100 million active users using technology in Microsoft based on Babylon.js, right? That's
absolutely
crazy.
Yeah, a team of 13 engineers working on it full time. It absolutely is a really incredible story to hear that again. I love it to hear your roots about just having a passion in 3D, and then to see that you're on the cutting edge doing something amazing, and then to have that very natural kind of like arrogance grow about like, we've got this, we've got a corner of the market, and then to have the guy in the corner be Unity and they're never going to amount to anything. Obviously Unity, they've done all right for themselves.
Yes.
Nova, your engine doesn't quite have the same oomph that Unity does. You sell it off, and then you come and you're humbled in the pits of Internet Explorer, slowly to rise back from the ashes. You should have picked the name Phoenix, I think, maybe.
Phoenix would have been a good name for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I don't want to cut anything short, but we're going to have many, many more opportunities to tell plenty of stories together as this podcast continues.
Yeah,
so
we have a shit ton of anecdotes. I'm not even mentioning SharePoint Spaces and all the other people. How we survive in Microsoft because Microsoft it was new for Microsoft. We should tell that another time, right?
That is a great story. Building the shield, as we call it. That'll be a fantastic. Yes. A fantastic story. But with that, we're actually going to sign off. We're going to call that a podcast. Thank you so much, no matter where you're turning in. Appreciate your time and checking this out. We hope you'll enjoy this one as well as future episodes. No matter where you're turning in, go ahead and check out the description of this podcast below so you can get links to the website, you can get links to the Babylon forum, and you can get links to all the places where you can learn more about Babylon.js.
Yeah, and I want to add, yes, I want to add that we are eager to get feedback and comments. So please use, whereas you are, if it's a podcast in Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts, just add comments. We will see them and we will take them in account. Or if it's on YouTube, just add the comments. Like we are eager to see if this format works for you guys, or what do you want to know. Maybe that's also a very good option. Like, what do you want to know? Ask the question, and we will try to fit that in the next podcast.
That's right. Ask your question. What do you want to know about? And we'll try and fit that into future episodes. Thank you so much, David, for joining me. Pumped about this inaugural episode, and we'll see y'all on the next one. Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.